Hey gang, what's up? Hope everybody's having a good day out there today. Thanks for tuning back in, much appreciated. And today we're going to be talking about polygraph exams and tournament competition. I'm going to discuss everything about them. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on them. Going to tell you about the time I was polygraphed in a FLW tournament, and should be an interesting discussion here. I think you guys might enjoy it. And hey, real quick, just wanted to do a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Just wanted to remind everybody, go to fishthemoment.com, check out our new lake map breakdowns that we're putting out. We've got a lot of different lake map breakdowns of lakes all across the country. Do personal map breakdowns. You can check out the full catalog at fishthemoment.com. Also, just a weekly reminder for my own channel, my intuitive angling channel. If you guys are interested in stepping up and becoming members of the channel, you can go to the main page of my YouTube channel. Click on the About tab and then go to Intuitive Memberships. Gives you all the information there. Basically, you get extra videos every week. You get access to my personal email address. And it's a great way to support the channel. If you guys would like to do that, that'd be much appreciated. Okay, let's talk a little bit about polygraph tests and their effectiveness in tournaments. There's a couple different ways I really want to approach this. First of all, I want to approach it as far as the rules themselves. I think a lot of rules in tournaments, I don't think they should be there. I think there's a lot of different rules that are created that are sort of unfair towards the anglers, they're unnecessary for the anglers. And I don't think that a violation of some of those rules equate to some of the penalty that you get. For example, let's say, for example, one of the rules in the tournament is if you're over 15 minutes late to the pre-tournament meeting or registration, you're going to get disqualified. That's the most ridiculous rule I've ever heard in my life. There's no telling, something could have come up. You could have just read your watch wrong. Could have been an honest mistake. I mean, to disqualify somebody for something like that is wrong. You know, you could put a $500 fine on it, and that would take care of it. Same with like a dead fish penalty. It's ridiculous that some outcomes in tournaments are determined by a 4-ounce dead fish penalty when you may have an angler that does everything they possibly can to a fish to keep that fish alive. For whatever reason, that fish may have been weak when it bit and it just died through no fault of the angler. Again, why can't you institute a $500 penalty instead of potentially, taking a tournament win away from somebody? And you could go on and on down the list with that. Certain violations, the infraction does not fit the penalty, sort of a thing. I could give you a lot of different examples. But anyway, back to polygraphs here. Polygraphs have been the main deterrent as far as keeping the tournaments honest for a long time. You've got a combination of the polygraph and the co-anglers or the marshals that basically are there to keep the tournaments honest. I think that like anything, you're going to have a few bad apples. I think overall, the vast majority, in the upper 90 percentile, you probably wouldn't have to have any type of rules instituted, and you're still not going to have a lot, people breaking rules as far as, trying to cheat. And there's a big difference between a rule infraction. There's rule infractions where you have intentional cheating going on, and then there may be an infraction where you have an unintentional cheating, and there may be, different variations about that. But I think a lot of it, revolves around intention, what the original intention was, if they were aware of what they were doing and they went ahead and did it to begin with. I'll give you guys a good example of the polygraph I was given. It was a FLW tournament at Lake Gunnersville. It's been about 4 years ago. And what they do in the FLW tournaments there, if you make the cut, top 20 or top 10 after the first 2 days, they give some random polygraphs. So I made the cut at Gunnersville. I was like in the top 10 or something after the second day. So Bill Taylor, the tournament director, he just came up to me at the weigh-in line and said, "Randy, you're going to get a polygraph test today." Just randomly come through that. So here's the thing about a polygraph. I'd never taken one before, but it's completely natural when somebody says you're going to get a polygraph test to be a little bit anxious about it. I don't care, who you are about it, because all these things start coming through your mind. It's like, okay, did I did I do something wrong at some point that is going to make me fail this test? I mean, did I talk to some dude at the gas station that was trying to tell me go over and hit this point over there, which happens all the time, guys. If you're a tournament fisherman, you know what I'm talking about. You get guys coming up to you at a gas pump all the time saying, I just caught a limit over on that point over there, or last week we ripped them over in such and such bay. Happens all the time. And you're not soliciting any information. You're just, the guy he just blabs this out. I've had it happen to me dozens of times in tournaments. So anyway, I'm thinking, as I'm standing in the line there, it's like, okay, man, was anything that I did was wrong? So they took me in there in the polygraph room and sat me down in the chair, and then they put one of those things around my middle, I guess it's a respiratory band or something that goes around your stomach, and then you've got the electrodes on your fingers and all that type of stuff that go with it, so they can monitor your breathing, your heart rate, all that type of stuff, when they ask you questions. So the first couple questions, they ask are pretty simple. It's like, is your name Randy Block? Yes. You live in Missouri? Yes. It's real simple questions to get a baseline. And then they start asking questions like, did you receive any information prior to the cutoff? Those type of pointed questions. And did you catch all your fish in a fair and sporting manner? And they basically went through the rules of the entire thing, and so I passed it, no problem with that, even though it was a little bit nerve-wracking, even though I knew I didn't violate any rules. So from that standpoint, nobody wants to get disqualified through polygraph, because there's been a handful of instances over the years where guys have failed polygraph tests, and it's hard to come back from that, guys. I mean, if you fail a polygraph test, there's a stigma attached to that, even though you may not have done it, but there's a stigma that's attached to that you can't get rid of. And if you refuse to take a polygraph, there's a stigma attached to that. So, it's sort of like it's an intimidating deterrent. It really is to that. Not to say that they are effective completely, because my buddy Rodney Schmolak, I've talked about, my Army Ranger buddy, he was telling me that they taught Rangers, in some of the special forces schools how to beat a polygraph test. I do think there's people out there that are extremely nervous, and they may fail a polygraph test even if they're honest. I think that happens too. So that's why polygraphs are inadmissible in court. But even though they're inadmissible in court, you still have to sign that release saying that you'll abide by the polygraph test in there. So anyway, that's the polygraph. The polygraph is a strong deterrent. I think it keeps the tournaments honest. But it gets back to, again, what I want to talk about real quick here is about the rules as far as the infractions. Okay, let's say, for example, let's go back to the gas station situation. Guys, I have probably had in my career, I don't know how many dozens, probably maybe 50 over the course of 30 years, where I'd be pumping gas and some guy would pull up next to me. I'm in the tournament and, want to help out. He just wants to, and, even though you say, I've had so many times I said, I really appreciate it, we can't get any information. They'll say something like, well, no, it's a free country. Nobody can stop me from talking. And they'll sit there and tell me, while I'm pumping my gas, where they've been catching fish at. So at that point, I remember there's one tournament at Lake Toho in Florida. It was the second day of the tournament. And so, the second day of practice. We had one more practice day, and I'd come off the water and I was going to get gas, and I was calculating in my mind where I was wanting to fish that third day. So I sort of had a game plan where I wanted to go, and this guy pulls up while I was getting gas there, and he started telling me, he goes, man, I caught him up there on this north side of Lake Kissimmee over in this area over here. I ripped him last week. And it just happened that was the area that I wanted to go practice in for the last day of practice. This guy I'd fished there a bunch before in the past, but he just happened to tell me that. And that's what I was planning on doing the third day of practice. So at this point, I'm saying, okay, what's going to happen if I get a polygraph test? Okay, if I go into this area the last day of practice and catch some fish and wind up making the cut in the tournament, and I get polygraphed and they ask me, did I receive any information? Am I going to get disqualified even though I planned on going there to begin with? So I went there that last day of practice because that's where I planned on going. And I can't even remember how I fished in the tournament, but I remember the whole tournament when I was fishing, I was really anxious or nervous. Like, man, if I get polygraphed, even though this is where I wanted to fish, this guy told me that, am I going to fail it? So what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, you guys tell me, what would you guys do in a deal like that? So from that standpoint, there's a lot of things about the rules in correlation with polygraphs and tournaments that are just, they're not quite right. I mean, and I don't know if they can ever be perfected. I don't know if there's a right way to do that. The main thing to me, as far as when you're talking about rule violations of tournaments, and Brian Latimer did a really good video. He did a video last week on his tournament up at St. Lawrence River. He got polygraphed up there. So this is actually what gave me the idea to the video, was on Brian's video he did up there a couple days ago. So the main thing about a polygraph, that one of the biggest rule violations that you can have, is if you got information prior to the cutoff in a tournament, and everything else is sort of secondary to that. But that's the big one right there that they really focus in on. So you just, aside from that, you've got a lot of different offshoots that goes along with that. So I don't know what the answer is with it. I think that probably that's, when you're actually in a tournament, it's very difficult for somebody to cheat if you have a marshal or an observer or even a GoPro camera and the threat of a polygraph test. I think that keeps everything honest. I think if we do have any rule violations, it's getting that information prior to the cutoff. And again, just like Brian made a good point in his video, that doesn't really help out. It really doesn't. I mean, it may, if you've got some guy that shows you an offshore ledge that nobody knows about, yeah, that could help occasionally, but in the big picture, it's not that big of a deal. So I don't know what the answer is to it. I mean, we have to do something to keep the integrity of these tournaments. I think a lot of it is if you get rid of some of those rules that maybe are difficult to enforce. And I think that no information rule is one of the most difficult rules to enforce, because there's so many gray areas around it. I mean, you can have something up on some obsolete website that's public to everybody, but nobody knows how to get to it except a handful of people. There's a lot of ways people can get around that. Ultimately, it's just, at some point, you just sort of have to trust the anglers to make the right decisions. But I think, in my opinion, polygraph tests, I think the main thing, not polygraphs, in my opinion, the main thing that keeps tournaments honest are marshals and co-anglers. And I think if you have somebody in the boat there, it's very difficult to do anything illegal during the day. And the polygraphs are basically there in place for some type of a rule violation that may have happened off the water prior to that. But again, if you take away those rules, level the playing field, that's something you wouldn't have to worry about. Anyway, just a quick, not quick, but sort of a lengthy video on polygraphs. Let me know what you guys think about it. I'd really be curious on that. Thanks again for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll be back tomorrow with another one. See you.